Hi there, it's Keith from the Evangelical Free Church, Stony Stratford, and we're continuing our series of short talks in the Gospel of Mark. Today we're looking at Mark chapter 9, 38 to 50. When Arnold Schwarzenegger was training to become a champion bodybuilder, he never cut corners. He was committed in his training. And one example I came across of how committed he was when he and a fellow bodybuilder decided to blast their arms, and they decided to do about 20 reps on their biceps. Now, 3 to 4 would usually be what you would do in a workout, but they were doing 20. Now, halfway through, churning out these reps, as many as you could, and then letting the other guy have a go, and then doing as many as you could again. Halfway through all that, the other bodybuilder said to Arnold, "Gee, Arnold, we've only got 10 sets left." Arnold said this, "No, we haven't. We got the one we're working on." You see, Arnold understood the psychology here. The danger was this. If you started to think, well, I've got sets after this, you might go easy on yourself on a set. No, he didn't want to do that. He wanted to get the max. I think we could say Arnold was a very, very committed trainer. Now it's interesting because in this passage we see commitment to Jesus. It starts with John asking a question. "Teacher," said John, "we saw a man driving out demons in your name, and we told him to stop because he was not one of us." John's probably feeling a bit jaded. They've had a bit of a telling off because they were arguing about who was the greatest out of each of them. And so he asks this question. It's probably a bit of a deflection. But Jesus makes this point. Verse 39, "Do not stop him," Jesus said. "No one who does a miracle in my name can in the next moment say anything bad about me. For whoever is not against us is for us." Now the phrase that's important there is "in my name." In the ancient world, to do something in a teacher's name meant to truly be a disciple of that teacher. It meant to follow what they were teaching word for word and not to deviate from it. It was to be totally committed. And Jesus points out that there is to be a fellowship between people, that even if someone gave you a cup of water in his name, in other words, believing and following what you believed from Scripture, then they certainly were a person who belonged to Christ. Well, Jesus then contrasts this. In verse 42, he says this, "If anyone causes these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to be thrown into the sea with a large millstone tied round his neck." The rabbis of the day tended to make points by exaggerating them. They would take an extreme example to make their point. And this is important to note here, because Jesus then goes on to talk about sin. If it's bad enough to deviate from his teaching, then to tolerate false teaching, to reject his teaching is just as bad. Verse 43, "If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life maimed than with 2 hands and go into hell, where the fire never goes out." He gives illustrations. If your hand, foot, eye causes you to sin, then don't tolerate it. But what he's talking about is not a literal cutting off or plucking out. It's about spiritual surgery. It's about not tolerating teaching that goes against Christ's. It is about being committed to his teaching. You see, his followers are to be committed. Verse 50, "Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can you make it salty again? Have salt in yourself and be at peace with each other." Be committed, stay sharp, Salt is a purifier. Stay with Jesus' teaching and do not add or subtract anything to it. Jesus is putting down a challenge here. To follow him takes commitment. But Jesus himself was committed. Paul, when writing to the Corinthian church, says this in the letter of 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21. God made him, that's Jesus, who had no sin, to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. You see what's happening there? Jesus takes our sin and gives us his righteousness. We might think Jesus is asking for a very high level of commitment. Yes, he is. But he showed a higher level of commitment to me and you in the first place. You may want to follow what we're doing in Mark. You may want to dig out a Bible, but if you haven't got one, at the front of the church, we've got these Gospels on the railings outside. You can pick one up from there, or you can phone me. My phone number's on the link here. Anyway, thank you again for listening.